Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Take me. I no longer wanted to live my life, but neither did I wish to die. So I resisted the temptation of the eternal abyss, knowing that any afterlife would hold no consolation. In effect, choosing a living death, achieved by numbing my senses against the world and disappearing within. By day, it was books, movies, video games, anything to place my mind in the body of another, transporting my consciousness to a plane where there were strict rules, and the main character always triumphed, as opposed to the uncertainty of my own existence. Rarely did I surface from fantasy, and only when my body demanded it, absolutely necessary. The sun never graced my flesh, and the air of my sealed chamber weighed heavy with my own musk. I was a fully grown woman, living as a teenage boy, and I didn't care. By night, it was a chemical affair. Amber spirit of any form or flavor would achieve my goal, as long as it was served with ice in its heart. Taste was a luxury I could ill afford. Not after losing my career to sheer apathy. It no longer seemed of any import whether digital numbers fell in line with invented targets. The whole world operated on an imaginary system of credit that existed only because we said it did. Anything outside of a practical vocation for which I no longer had time or patience to learn, felt like playing pretend and a waste of life. My usual haunt was a quiet dive bar at the end of my city block. Its proximity, the only deciding factor, limiting the expedition home to a straight line stumble. That night, I spent as any other, nursing a tumbler and examining the slow melt of the frozen shards it protected. Time for one last round, sweetheart? Frank asked, ducking his head into my line of sight. He was a kind soul. Despite the tattoo-covered biceps, large enough to toss me out like a rag doll, he always let me brood in peace. Watching my back and moving on any would-be suitors. The apparent ruffian doted on me with a brotherly worry. He never denied my cash, though. While busy at weekends, the quiet, dead-end joint couldn't afford to turn away drunks the rest of its working days. I felt at times to be single-handedly paying the poor guy's wage. Always, I answered, offering up my low-tide glass and a half-hearted smile. As he poured, I glanced across the room. There were a few men in suits, clearly avoiding their homes and wives. A couple of tourists just looking for a warm place to rest, and a scattering of solitary older women. They, like me, I assumed, had nowhere else to go, no one to return to, and nothing to live for, aside from the never-ending goal of forgetting. I'd had it all. Not so long ago, I had been lucky enough to know love and comfort. However, my good fortune was stolen away by one solitary word, printed in black ink on a medical chart. That word had ripped my future away and burned it to ash for good measure, leaving me here in my perpetual endeavor to avoid my own existence. Holed up at the corner booth, he was there. As always, my constant, silent drinking buddy. Every night, he arrived like clockwork in a pressed black shirt and pants with shining black boots. His midnight wardrobe offset only by the pale ivory of his skin and the crimson of his lips. Ordering a single jar of bourbon, which would never grace his tongue, there he stoically remained, silently surveying the room. I had never even seen him rise to use the bathroom. How he managed to leave several times a week with a different conquest on his arm, I had no idea. Girl or guy, it didn't seem to matter to him. They just flocked to his side, like magnets being drawn together. With only a look, he seemed to seduce a target with an hour or less of minimal effort. He then escorted them out the door for what I only assumed to be a night of intense pleasure. He was certainly handsome in a clean-cut way, but he had never directed his gaze at me or any of the other regulars. It was always the passing through that succumbed. Alaric was his name, according to Frank. In spite of his blatant philandering, I couldn't help but imagine he treated his prey with more humanity that I had been dealt by the man I once loved. That cursed filth had proclaimed to love me. The putrid liar had promised me protection. The venomous snake had abandoned me at my most vulnerable. One word was all it took to break our bond, shatter his oath completely. One printed word, voiced in clinical monotone under fluorescent lights. The word that tore my future to shreds and sent my beloved in search of a more suitable mate, infertile. I had been told I was still grieving, and knew it to be true. My depression, spiced with anger, told a traditional tale. What I considered a lie was that it would end in an accepted peace. How could it, when my natural immortality had been ripped away? Any harmony I would have found in life would have risen from knowing my memory, and soul would have persisted through the generations that came after me. Anecdotes told of my character to grandchildren and onward, keeping me alive in thought, my name on a branch of an ever-expanding tree. Instead, there would be no furthering of my story. It would end when I did. So why not just get it over with? Any experiences gained would be lost to time anyway. So why bother? Why expend all that energy on impermanence? I should have just ended the torment that day, when my forehead had been stamped with pointless. There were only two reasons I held back from instigating the end. One was the fear that any afterlife would be purposed with watching over loved ones, for which I had none. So it would tally that I would be no better off than I was now. The other was Alaric, and the solution I had begun to suspect he could offer me. My quest to lose myself in various media had educated me thoroughly in the ways of the vampire, the desperate young girl in need of connection, an outcast from the society surrounding her. Ill-fitting in the living world, she would always come across a creature of the night who would welcome her into his ranks, usually with sultry and salacious single-mindedness. Alas, if Alaric was what I suspected him to be, he ignored me, perhaps because my clouded mind was reaching for a fantasy solution to a real-life problem. Most likely, he was only a strange-looking man with a talent for seduction. Regardless, I couldn't shake the idea. Too many aspects of his regular attendance pointed to the supernatural. If I was wrong, all I would achieve was appearing like the drunk I had become, which was small consequence to risk being proven right. "Good evening, Alaric," I slurred, and slid onto the red velvet bench beside him. "Do I know you?" he asked in a soft English accent. His slow and steady speech belayed a calm, in direct contrast to my harsh American. "Not officially, but I've sat at that bar every night for several weeks, watching you. So I believe I know you very well." "Oh?" he asked, waiting for me to fill the space. "I know what you are," I whispered, in the way that inebriated people do when they believe themselves subtle. "And what is that?" he said, smiling as if humoring a toddler. The feeling of being infantilized by a look sent waves of submission through me. It made me feel safe under his powerful gaze, willing to surrender control into his adept hands. Returning to a childlike state would allow me to release the expectations I had placed on myself to assume parenthood, which only solidified my resolve to follow my intended course of action. "Vampire," I blurted. I did not want to drag this out into a feature film of suspect and intrigue. I wanted my answer and solution that night. The sooner, the better. His reaction was as expected. A hearty laugh, but one that did not convince his eyes that my accusation was truly funny. "Does such a thing exist?" he asked of me. I did not believe so, until I happened upon you. I see you taking victims, always transients, who never return. You never drink, never eat, never use the bathroom. You are pale, intense, clothed in black, and I have only ever seen you at night. Perhaps I am simply peculiar, he offered. Perhaps. I nodded. I think it worth looking the fool to discover the truth. He responded, never breaking his eye contact. His intense stare examining every facet of me via the portal of my irises. It felt as though he flayed me from the outside until his scrutiny fell upon my vulnerable soul. I now understood how he seduced so many, so quickly. I wish you to turn me, I said, interrupting his gaze before I fell completely at his feet. My life has lost all meaning with the living, and I would greet death but for the fear of further loneliness. I see a single solution for one who would not live, but does not wish to die. So please, take me with you into immortality. Follow me, he said, and rose, striding to the doors, without looking back to see if I followed. He must have been as certain as I was that I would. Ignoring a disapproving look from Frank, I made my way across the room to the exit. I pursued my immediate master out of the bar and through dark alleys that all smelled of refuse and rats. Stumbling to remain on his heels, I signaled my deference like a dog called to attend. He stopped suddenly, turning and reaching a strong arm around my waist, and in one motion, pressing me against the scorched wall of a building. Dumpsters, boxes, and crates now blocked my view of anything but him. You would submit to your impulse? He asked, his lips pressed to my ear and his hand against my chest, pinning me in place against the cold bricks. I could feel his heavy breaths quickening in lust, his hand quivering where it rested between my breasts. Whether it was from desire for my blood or body, I still did not know. The chance of stretching my living death into infinity was worth giving him either. You would succumb to my will? He asked again. Break from this life and join me in whatever comes next? Yes! I screamed in ecstasy, feeling excitement and promise for the first time since that word had plunged me into darkness. Take me, please. Take me away from this temporary world. Sudden pain and cold followed. His dead cheeks pressing against my neck and his teeth puncturing my jugular. My warm blood mixed with his icy touch, like boiling soup spilt on a snowy mountain. I closed my eyes and writhed in anticipation of the immortality I sought. Eventually, he pulled back. The world swam and swirled as my head felt as but a feather. I saw his chin stained brown with my dried blood. How long had I given myself to this creature? The low light of the alley weighed down on my senses. The rotten smell of the trash bags assaulted, and without his hard body pressed against mine, I felt exposed. Will it happen now? I managed to mutter through the disorientation, my eyes rolling and unable to focus on his beautiful face. Will you die? Yes. Will you turn? I doubt it, he said, sneering down at me. Somehow he had grown tall, or I had fallen. I did not know which was more real. I am a predator, not some romanticized, dangerous lover to be tamed, as this age loves to depict. You are nothing but prey. I have no desire to intentionally turn game, as I am sure you would not share your bed with a cow. He spun on his heels and stalked into the night, with no further words or explanation. I was alone, crumpled amongst the filth, dying in the dark. I had not the energy to fear, only regret the trust I had placed in a monster I had not understood. As my eyelids grew heavier and the cold seeped deeper, I began to long for those temporary years, the moments I was so willing to throw away, for all the time I could have had for myself, the experiences I could have taken as my own without concern of their lasting, for the lives I could have affected, but now never would. Perhaps the next plane would offer more than I had imagined. I did not intend to waste the chance again. If it did, I closed my eyes and waited for whatever would come next, accepting in peace that I had ushered in my own end by ungratefully reaching for more than I had been gifted, forever haunted. I know. I have to run, get away, but as yet, haven't the courage. I am in the corner, huddled, naked. I'm more colorful than any clothes I could wear. I'm red, black, purple, and blue, battered and bruised, my crime inquiring about his whereabouts. Together for 6 years now, our beautiful son asleep upstairs, and I'm not entitled, according to him, to ask him anything. I am not and never will be the boss of him. I'm replaying my actions and conversation over and over again. He's never raised his hand to me before. Verbal abuse, yes. Threats, yes. But never until now, connection physically. I realize this didn't just spring up out of nowhere. For weeks now, it's been building money worries, new baby, never having lived together before. He can't handle it. He can't even handle the thought of being a dad. He acts as if he hates him. I believe he's jealous of him. Maybe it's just a one-off, I tell myself. I wipe my nose, and my hands are covered in snot, tears, and blood. I have to get up. I have got a baby to look after. He can't see me like this. I need to shower. I can wash away the blood, but never will I be able to wash away the shock and fear I felt. He hasn't gone near me since the birth, and last night, with the first punch, his erection appeared. It grew the more he hit me. The names he called me, the force he used. I can't tell my parents. They didn't want me to move in with him in the first place. I'm 19. I had told them. An adult and a new mom with a fella that adores me. I'll be fine. How can I now go back and tell them they were right? It's now 4 months on and middle of summer, and I'm clad in a woolly, oversized sweater which hides a multitude. He's got clever and hits me in places which can be hidden from everyone, but he doesn't hide his beatings from his son. In fact, I think he waits until he's asleep in my lap sometimes to start. He knows I'm more afraid of him hurting him than me. Yesterday, something in me snapped. I'm not taking any more. My son's not taking it anymore. We both deserve better. In walks the oppressor. I usually sit waiting to suss out his mood before I do anything, but not today. I carry on reading a book. Paul's asleep in his cot, oblivious. He glares at me, walks into the kitchen, and comes storming back. Where's my tea? You know what time I get in at, and my tea and dinner should be already prepared, sitting on the table, waiting for me. Paul and I have already eaten, and since the last time I prepared food, it ended up all over me and the kitchen. I've decided I won't be doing that anymore. His face is incredulous. In any other situation, it would be hilarious, actually. Even now, it's hilarious. I start to giggle and can't stop. Nothing could have stopped it. Have you finally lost the plot, stupid bitch? What's funny? I stand up and ask him, for once, can we take our fight into a different room and let the baby sleep in peace? I start walking before he gets a chance to respond. He comes in, arm raised, and stops midair as he catches sight of the carving knife in my hand. I slice and only succeed in ripping his shirt. He starts apologizing, the only time since the first time. Tells me he loves me. He'll never hit me again. I can feel my resolve breaking and need to get to my son. I start walking and he grabs me. The knife clatters to the floor. I knew there and then I was going to pay for this. Big time. He goes in and wakes up. Paul puts the disturbed toddler in his walking chair and hands him the knife. I beg him to take it off him, but he walks over to me and spits in my face. I tell him I'll do anything he wants, that I love him, but just take the knife off the baby. He pushes me on my knees and makes me go on all fours and rapes me while my son gurgles and plays with the knife. Not a scream or whimper do I make, but hum and make soothing noises so Paul won't get alarmed. When he's finished, he gets up and urinates on me and Paul. I've never known such hate, and haven't experienced it on the same level since. When he leaves the next day, I pack up all his stuff and our stuff. I ring my parents and beg them to get me out of there, and plead with them, can I come home? I hear my mother sobbing in the background, and my dad says, darling, we've been dying for this call. It killed us the last time when you asked us to leave and not come back. We'll be there right away. I never told them about the rapes, too ashamed, but the latest beatings were obvious. You only had to look at me. The drive home is terrifying and soothing at the same time. I knew I'd done too much growing up. I could never go back to the girl that lived with Mammy and Daddy again. I wasn't the same girl. He killed himself in a prison cell. I didn't send him there. It was an awful crime committed on someone else. It was a twisted relief, knowing Paul would never have to see him, and a twisted sadness because he'd been my first love, and for a long time I adored him. Time and life move on, scars heal, hope returns. But your past is always your past, and a part of me will be haunted forever. Gardener's World. You've chosen a good time to pay me a visit. I've pulled up some pretty decent leeks this morning. Got some lovely onions in the store, and a rosemary bush that is totally oblivious to all the nonsense that seems to have befallen our world. My garden really has been my savior, my little farm. I can grow what I need and get by very nicely on what my garden supplies. I do wish I'd had a better crop of carrots. I used the finest bone meal fertilizer, but they were a total bust this year. My soil is a little too heavy for them, too much clay. But it's the carrot fly that really did for them. They said our biggest enemy was the sickness. Then they tried to say it was the foreign governments. Then it was all about misinformation and the enemy within. But I survived because I knew all along my only real enemy is carrot fly. When the gas supply was cut off back in '25, I opened up an old fireplace so I could cook on an open flame indoors. Not a pretty job, no power tools, naturally. So, me and Axe had to do most of the heavy work, hacking out the wall they'd used to gag the old hearth. I like it though. The exercise, solving problems, working out a plan to get me to the next crop. Most of the stuff we've lost, I didn't care for anyway. You're lucky today with the weather. It gets too smoky and hot indoors, even with the chimney. No, on a day like this, we cook al fresco. Something lovely about doing my cooking in the place where I get most of my food. I'm a man of nature. That's what I am. You saw my roses on the way in, didn't you? It's the roses and the raspberry canes that bring people to my garden. I took part of the fence down so people can see them more easily, so they can come in and explore. Fancy that. In times like these, someone actually taking part of a good, strong fence down. Well, there's method to my madness. I like to have visitors. Brought you here to me today, didn't it? Relax. Enjoy the sun. Would you like some water? I've got plenty. Since the neighbors have been thinning out, I've been using their houses' guttering, as well as my own, to collect the rain. Been able to grow in their gardens too. That's why I'm doing so well in these tough times. That's why I can afford to lose a few raspberries to curious, hungry bypassers. Waste nothing and work hard. That's me. Do whatever needs to be done. Please, have some water. But how is he going to cook out here, you ask? A very good question. Let me just remove this old tarp. And ta-da! An old enamel bath. Not as common as they once were. But this beautiful old iron roll top was in my neighbor's place. He was a lawyer in the old days. Fat lot of good that did him. Must have cost a fortune. Weighs a ton. I convinced them to help me carry it here in exchange for some food and water. And here we are, those old claw and ball feet holding it up above my fire. An antique bath sitting on my lawn in the shade of my willow. Heaven, you look a bit concerned. Don't worry about the staining on the sides of the bath. That's inevitable when you cook with direct heat like this. It looks dirty, but it's not. It's just well seasoned from all the grease and juices. I'll just get this fire lit. Thank you for gathering all of this wood, by the way. Told you I'd trade you for water and the raspberries, didn't I? I'm a man of my word. We'll need a couple of buckets of water for the tub. And what else? I think today we'll have a couple of these leeks. No carrots, though. Curse you, carrot fly. And I think we'll have a big, dirty handful of the fresher stems from my gnarly old rosemary bush. Don't worry, the heat will kill the germs. I'll use some of this too. Take a look. It's a pot of fat. My grandma would have called it dripping. You must keep this stuff. It's more valuable than gold, literally, these days. I preserve it whenever I cook. It's full of calories and protein and goodness. It keeps for ages. I've got a cupboard full of it. This is from the last few rabbits I cooked. It's a bit of a cocktail, to be honest. Rabbits, rats, squirrels, street rats, raspberry thieves. Only joking, they weren't thieves. You're not a thief. I can spare a few raspberries. I'm going to get this beautiful stuff, nice and hot, and then get the leeks in there. Then the water and the rosemary. Axe, get over here, you big lump. He looks brutal. but I keep him sharp enough to chop the leeks. Look, he's bright as a sushi knife. I can use him to shave. Look close. There now. A slice of leek you can see through. That will just melt in the fat. My mouth is watering. Did you hear that? I love that sound, that sizzle. The popping twigs under the bath. The first chunk of leek sliding around in there, in all that greasy goodness, hissing and cackling. The sun weeping through the old willow. No more horrible planes overhead. No traffic. No more reports about all the doom and gloom. No more sirens. Just a sizzle and a pop, and the waft of home cooking on the late summer breeze. Potatoes. How could I forget potatoes? I sometimes think I'm losing my mind. Not many of this year's crop left, but this is the best way to use them. They add body. Oh, that was unintentional, sorry. Please don't be upset. Poor taste has no place in my garden. Well, I must say, it's been nice to have someone to talk to other than Axe. It has been a while. The raspberries will be dying off soon, and the roses won't last for much longer after that. I suspect I'll be getting fewer visitors. But never mind. I'm going to have plenty of provisions to keep me strong over the winter. And there's still blackberries out, so you never know. I'll be fine in the house, sleeping in the cellar with Axe. Anyway, looks like we've got a rolling boil going here. So sorry, but it's bath time. Stay quiet, friend. Lila sank into the couch, the flickering glow of the TV screen illuminating the shadows that loomed the darkened room. She had chosen a silly rom-com, hoping to distract herself. But the air felt thick, almost suffocating. Every creak of the old house made her jump, and the shadows in the corners seemed to whisper her name in a language she couldn't understand. It was late, and her roommate Clara was working on her thesis upstairs. But Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't the only ones in the home. An uneasy tension coiled in her stomach, forcing her to triple check behind each door, under the couch, and even peered behind the shoe rack, half expecting to find something or someone hiding within. She ducked below the kitchen counters, her fingers feeling for a butcher's knife. Her heart sank when she felt the empty spot in the knife rack. It was missing. The chill creeping up her spine told her that whatever was happening was more than just her imagination. She glanced toward the back door, where the moonlight shimmered through the glass panes, casting eerie reflections that danced on the walls. A sudden gust of wind rattled the bay window, sending a shiver through her. Something was off. With a tentative step, she approached the back door, feeling the cold metal handle beneath her palm. The moment she unlocked it, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sound startled her, and she snatched it up, her pulse quickening at the sight of Clara's name. "Did you hear that?" the message read. A cold dread settled over her, crawling beneath her skin as the unease that had settled over her intensified. What could Clara possibly be hearing? She typed back, "Hear what?" but hesitated, glancing down the hallway that led to the stairs. The dim light from the TV cast erratic shadows that flickered and danced. And for a fleeting moment, Lila thought she saw something move behind the curtains. Her breath hitched, a primal instinct warning her that she was not alone. Maybe it was just the movie messing with her mind, but the feeling of being watched pressed heavier on her chest. Another message chimed in. "I think someone's outside." Panic surged through Lila's veins, prickling her skin. She stood frozen for a moment, weighing her options. Should she check the back door or run upstairs to her roommate? Clara's words echoed in her mind. Why would she think someone was outside? How could she guess that? Why is she being so casual about it? "Are you sure?" Lila typed back, her fingers trembling. "Just stay quiet," Clara replied. "I'll call you when I'm sure." A shiver ran down Lila's spine. Her instincts screamed at her to call the police, but fear held her in place. The silence grew oppressive, and she could hear the faint sound of something dragging from above. Without thinking, she moved to the back door, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. As she reached for the handle, a scream erupted from upstairs, a raw, piercing wail that silenced the night. It was Clara's voice. Adrenaline propelled Lila forward as she bolted toward the staircase, her heart hammering in her chest. "Clara!" she yelled, bounding up the steps 2 at a time. The hallway stretched out before her, dark and foreboding, thick with an air of dread. "Clara!" she shouted again, panic clawing at her throat. The scream had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt like a warning. When she reached Clara's door, her hand trembled as she tried to push it open. It was locked. Why was it locked? Lila fumbled for her spare key, forcing the door open. The room was empty, save for the dim glow of Clara's laptop on the desk. Papers were strewn about, books toppled over, and the window was wide open, allowing a chilling breeze to sweep through the room. Lila stepped inside, her heart racing. "Clara," Lila called softly, her voice just above a whisper. "Where are you?" Suddenly, she heard a soft rustling from the bathroom. Her breath caught, and fear settled like a stone in her stomach as she approached, each step feeling heavier than the last. She reached for the door, her mind racing with images of Clara being attacked. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle, glancing back at the open window that seemed to beckon her to escape. Then her phone buzzed again, illuminating the screen with another message from her roommate. "Don't come in." Lila's heart sank, and a sense of dread washed over her. The message was sent from Clara's phone, but something felt wrong. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The rustling from the bathroom stopped abruptly, replaced by a suffocating silence that wrapped around her like a shroud. Lila took a step back, cold sweat prickling her skin. She felt trapped. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't leave Clara. With trembling hands, she yanked open the bathroom door. Clara stood there, her eyes winded and wild, blood staining her nightgown, the crimson liquid soaking into her hair like a macabre halo. In the bathtub, a body lay motionless, limbs grotesquely scattered like a puzzle, arms and legs discarded beside the sink. The young woman's lifeless eyes stared vacantly at the ceiling, unseeing. Lila could barely make out the limb hanging from Clara's hand, for in the other was a knife, glistening in the remnants of her victim. Lila froze, her mouth dry and her mind reeling. The air thickened with a metallic tang, and she could feel her lungs begging for air. "Clara," her voice cracked, trembling as violently as her body was. "What have you done?" Clara slowly turned her head, a strange, twisted smile creeping across her lips, glistening with the blood that stained her face. "You said you didn't hear anything," she said, her voice cold and deliberate. "You lied." "I didn't," Lila began, only to be cut off. "You lied," Clara repeated, her tone sharp, cutting through the air like the blade in her hand. "You need to stay quiet, friend, and I'll make sure you never lie again." The door behind Lila slammed shut, sealing her inside the suffocating darkness. Fear surged through her as Clara advanced, the knife glinting ominously in the dim light. "Clara, please." Lila's plea faded into a whimper, the weight of impending dread crushing her. Without warning, Clara lunged forward, the blade slicing through the air with a cruel precision. Pain exploded in Lila's mouth, and she gasped, trying to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the metallic taste of blood. As Clara withdrew the knife, Lila felt a sudden emptiness. Her tongue, her voice, her very essence slipped from her mouth and fell to the floor with a sickening thud. Clara's eyes gleamed with a wild delight as she leaned closer, whispering words that curled around Lila's mind like smoke. "Now you'll stay quiet," Clara said, her voice low and dripping with satisfaction. "No more lies, no more noise." The door behind Lila slammed shut, the weight of darkness closing in, silencing her voice and sealing her fate. Way, terminal, dread, 1. The announcement. The loudspeakers crackled to life, sending a sharp hiss of static through the cavernous, dimly lit terminal. The noise was jarring, a sudden intrusion in the uneasy silence that had settled over the travelers, who were slumped in their seats, fatigue etched deeply into their faces. The endless delays had worn them down, and now they were too exhausted to glance up. The air was thick with the stale scent of burnt coffee and damp, worn-out carpets. A suffocating blend that only added to the growing sense of unease. Then, the announcement came, each word clear yet eerily mechanical, carrying a disquieting undertone. Attention, all passengers. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, all flights are cancelled indefinitely. Please remain in the terminal. Do not leave the airport. We apologize for the inconvenience. The voice was devoid of emotion, a cold, detached command that sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Murmurs of frustration, tinged with fear, spread among the passengers, their voices rising and falling like the tide. Overhead, the departure boards flickered, the once orderly rows of destinations and times now spiraling into chaos as every flight switched from delayed to canceled. The fluorescent lights above seemed to dim in unison, their sporadic flickering casting long, jittery shadows across the floor. The terminal, once bustling with the energy of travel, now felt vast, cold, and hollow. A tomb of missed connections and lost hope to the unseen. Hours dragged on, though no one could tell whether it was hours or mere minutes. Time had lost its grip, slipping through the cracks like the insidious cold that seeped into the bones of those huddled in the terminal. People tried to make themselves comfortable, reclining awkwardly on the hard, unyielding plastic chairs, some curling up on the cold, unforgiving floor. Others wandered aimlessly, their eyes hollow, faces pale under the flickering lights. The airport staff, usually a constant presence, had vanished without a trace. The food courts stood empty, their colorful signs now dark, and the enticing smells of food had long faded. Even the ever-vigilant security personnel were nowhere to be found. The only sound was the low, relentless hum of the air conditioning. This dull drone draped the terminal in a blanket of oppressive silence. Occasionally, the rustle of a traveler shifting uncomfortably, or the faint tap of rain against the massive windows broke the quiet. Still, these sounds only served to amplify the growing sense of isolation. The terminal's once familiar noises had transformed into something alien and unsettling. A young woman, clutching a frayed boarding pass like a lifeline, approached the information desk, her footsteps echoing eerily in the empty space. "Excuse me?" she called out, her voice trembling as it reverberated off the walls, swallowed by the emptiness surrounding her. "Is anyone here? What's going on?" Her voice lingered in the air, unanswered, before fading into the void. She turned back towards the scattered passengers, her heart pounding. Then, something caught her eye, a fleeting movement in the glass's reflection, a quick and fluid shadow slipping away into the dim corridors leading to the gates. She spun around, eyes wide, but saw nothing. The same lifeless scene. Yet something had changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, charged with an unseen menace. It was as if the terminal itself was watching, waiting. Others began to sense it too. Paranoia spread like a contagion, infecting one passenger after another. Whispers grew in intensity as people shared their sightings. Dark shapes glimpsed from the corner of their eyes, only to vanish when looked at directly. A man, pale skin glistening with sweat, swore he saw a figure. No, something, standing in the shadows near the baggage claim, its eyes gleaming with a cold, malevolent light. His voice cracked as he recounted the encounter, his gaze darting nervously around the terminal, as if expecting the shadow to return. 3. The departure. The terminal descended into a deeper, more oppressive gloom as night fell. The few remaining lights flickered and buzzed, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways, their edges fraying as if they could reach out and ensnare the unwary. The temperature dropped, a biting chill creeping into the air, chilling the travelers. It was a cold that wasn't just physical. It carried the weight of something ancient and malevolent, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. A family huddled together near a gate, the mother clutching her children tightly, her eyes wide and wild as they darted around the room, watching the shadows with growing terror. A businessman, his suit now wrinkled and his tie askew, paced frantically near the exit doors, tugging at his tie as if it were strangling him. Others remained rooted to their seats, too afraid to move, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet wide open with fear. Sleep was not an option. The darkness held many unknowns and unseen threats. Then, a sound came from deep within the terminal, a low, rhythmic thudding, distant at first, but growing steadily louder. It was the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing through the deserted halls. But these weren't the footsteps of a person. They were too slow, too heavy, and each step seemed to reverberate with a dull finality, like the tolling of a death knell. Panic erupted. People screamed, bolting in all directions, their frantic movements chaotic and disoriented as they searched desperately for an escape. But the exits were sealed. The heavy glass doors locked tight, the windows impossibly thick, distorting the view outside into a surreal, shifting landscape that offered no hope of escape. The shadows were no longer content to linger at the edges. They moved with purpose now, fluid and sentient, slithering along the walls, creeping beneath doors, stretching across the floor like dark tendrils seeking out the terrified passengers. One by one, the travelers were claimed. The shadows reached out, ensnaring them and pulling them into the darkness. Their screams echoed briefly, only to be abruptly cut off as the shadows engulfed them and dragged them into the abyss. Those who tried to hide found no sanctuary. The shadows seeped into every crack and crevice, relentless in their pursuit. The terminal became a hunting ground, the shadows of the predators and the passengers their prey. For the truth, the terminal was silent once more, save for the occasional crackle of the intercom and the distant, echoing thuds that marked the end of yet another life. The air was thick with the lingering scent of fear and despair, a miasma that clung to the walls, the floor, and the air itself. Then, as if in response to the bloodshed, the final announcement came, its tone eerily calm, almost soothing. This is a final boarding call for Flight 66. Passengers, please proceed to Gate D for immediate departure. A small group remained, huddled together, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. They stared at each other with hollow eyes, their faces pale as the full horror of their situation sank in. The gate mentioned in the announcement was at the far end of the terminal, a place none had dared approach. It had always been shrouded in mystery, blocked off by barriers that hinted at endless construction, yet no progress was ever seen. Now, the barriers were gone, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor that led to a single gate. The gate loomed ominously at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar. A harsh, unnatural light spilled out from within, bathing the area in an eerie glow. The light was too bright, too white, too wrong. It wasn't the light of salvation or escape. It was the light of something far more sinister, a beacon drawing passengers into the unknown. Compelled by a force they couldn't resist, the survivors began to move toward the gate, their feet dragging as if weighed down by an invisible burden. The closer they got, the more they felt their very essence being pulled from them, their bodies dissolving into the shadows, their souls ripped from their forms and dragged into the eternal void that awaited beyond the gate. As the last of the passengers crossed the threshold, the terminal plunged into complete darkness, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint, lingering whispers of the lost. In the deserted control room, empty screens flickered with static, showing footage of an empty terminal, devoid of life, as if no one had ever been there. Now, a silent, empty shell. The airport waited patiently for the next group of unsuspecting travelers, ready to ensnare them in its endless, inescapable darkness. The intercom crackled one last time, then fell silent. Outside, the world continued, blissfully unaware of the horrors within the terminal. Inside, the shadows waited, patient and hungry, knowing that sooner or later, more victims would arrive, forever lost in the terminal's eternal